Introduce Justice Sonia Sotomayor. She's going to talk to us and sign her memoir today, My Beloved World. Everyone probably knows the background story about the justice's ascent from tenements in the South Bronx through Princeton, Yale Law School, United States District Court, the Second Court of Appeals, and finally to become the third woman and first Latina to sit your copy of her memoir, you'll be experiencing a wonderful personal journey of how and why she got to where she is today. Now, I know all of you here understand that the highlight of this week for Justice Sotomayor is coming here at Book People. So let's give her a warm welcome.
Big guys will drag me back if anybody touches me. So, okay? I'll get to see each of you because I'm not leaving until I sign every book you've bought. Okay? So, I can't tell you how thrilled I am to be here. You know, Texas should know that I have been invited the last 3 years by numerous groups all over the state to come and visit. And I do have a day job, so I can't go anywhere that I want to go. But I have promised that I would come. And I honor my promises whenever I can. And you should all know that when I created this book tour, I asked the publisher to include Texas, specifically Austin, and I'll explain why in a few minutes. And you are the third state that I've been to, all right? The other two places that preceded you were my two homes, Washington, D.C. and New York. Texas is... This was a labor of love, my book. And people asked me why I wrote it, and my preface, the very first 2 or 3 pages of the book explain why. But there were really 3 very critical ingredients to this book. The first was, in these 3 years, I've met with a lot of people. And from people's questions and approaches to me, it was very clear that people had sort of put me up on a pedestal somewhere, really high above them, and that they thought somehow that I was sort of out of thin air, you know, that I just came full grown, you know, that I was born a justice. Far from the truth. And in fact, one of the most powerful lessons of my first year was in talking to Justice Stevens, who at the time had been the longest serving justice on the court. And he was just reaching 90 years of age. And he wrote this brilliant opinion, and I called him up to congratulate him. And woefully I said to him, John, I don't know if I could ever write something like this. And he said something that has stayed with me. A justice is not born, Sonia. You grow into it. And that message was part of this book, of explaining to people how I grew to be Sonia. Because you see, when you get thrust on this public stage and people are idealizing you, there's a real temptation to get conceited. Many of us have seen it in public figures, okay? I didn't want to be one of those people. And I've told my friends that I wrote this book to try to figure out what worked for me, what didn't work for me, and to ensure that every person who read the book would be able to know who the real Sonia was, number one, but more importantly to realize that each of you, every reader I hope, will find a piece of themselves in this book, that they'll identify with an experience, with a feeling that I have had in my life, and come away saying, if she could do what she's done, I can do something too. The second joy of this book, and I expected a little bit of it. I knew my mother was aging, as was most of my family. And Mom's memory is fading. And I knew I couldn't wait much longer to actually find out something about my family. Because you see, I got tons of questions during the confirmation process about them and where they came from. And I couldn't, you know, I gave answers that were actually wrong. Because after spending time really talking to my family, I found out things I didn't know. Start with, I didn't know where my father was born. My favorite current story is to explain that the people who were helping me in research my background in Puerto Rico found out where Daddy was born, and the lady who was working with me took a letter to the priest that said I authorized her to look at my family's records. And the priest looked at her and said, we knew she'd get here. And reached back and took out the family records. So they'd been saving it and waiting. But most importantly, I found out about a father I never knew, and a love story between him and my mother that I had never heard. And that's been the greatest gift of this book to me personally. And it's taught me a lesson I share with all of you. If you have parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles who know your family history, spend time talking to them about it. Don't you retell the story. Let them tell it and actually listen. But most importantly, do what I finally did with my own mother and ask why. And when you read my mother's chapter, chapter 7, which is my absolutely favorite chapter in the whole book, all right? But don't read it first, because it's important. It's really important to read what came before it to understand the extraordinary nature of what I discovered, okay? And so it's important to read the other chapters before you turn to that one. But that sort of why question, we just often forget to do it, you know? And so take the time, if you would, and spend time really listening. Don't do what my friends do at Sunday dinner. Oh no, don't tell that story again. There is a message in this book for every kid, not only in this room, but I hope in the world. If I attribute my success to anything, it is because I have never been afraid of saying, I don't know. You know, it's pure arrogance to make believe you understand something when you don't. It's not a virtue, it's false pride. And what it does is stop you from learning. And it stops you from getting ahead. And you'll read in the book how often I did it. And it wasn't until I started writing this book that I really understood that it was the key, the real key to my success. And it's something that everybody can do. Every child should know and never be ashamed to say, I don't know. And go out and look for help in learning. And you see, I followed my own advice in writing this book. I have written countless speeches. I've written countless legal opinions. I was told there were over 3,000 of them in 2009 when I was nominated to the court. I had never kept track, and when they told me the number, I was in a state of shock, okay? But I've never written a book. So what does Sonia do? She does what she does every single time. She goes out and she finds somebody to teach her. So what did I do? I came to Austin. Because I'm told you're one of the most creative cities in the nation. I thought only in music, but I'm finding out in literature as well. And I found Zara Bushman, who, where in the world is she hiding? Up in that little corner over there. And I read some of her work, and I said, that lady knows what she's doing. And she took every step of this book with me and challenged me to write a story that was better than anything I ever imagined I could do. And I am so eternally grateful for having found a soulmate and a friend in the process. And she's the one who taught me to ask the why. Because every time I told a story into the dictaphone and she was listening, she'd say, Sonia, think about it, why? And if I said something that didn't make sense, she'd ask me another question. And so when I sat down with my family, I knew finally how to talk to them. And that's how I found the stories that I did. But the kid that you'll read about, who was told in college that she didn't know how to write English, and who spent years reading vocabulary books and reading grammar books, rereading them, and learning through the help of many friends how to write, has just been told as I was coming here that My Beloved World is #1 on the New York Times. For February 3rd. I can't tell you. This has been a week of improbable events, swearing in a Vice President of the United States. and now having a story that people are actually reading. Okay, I missed something. Thank you for sharing tonight with me, for coming, for sharing this extraordinary moment for me. The reception I've received in this town has been heartwarming and touching, deeply, deeply touching. I've promised to come back, and I will. You will. And if you have patience, I will sign every book that everyone's bought. Thank you.
If everyone will sit tight for just a few minutes, we're going to get our first group lined up. Please just stay where you are for like 5 minutes, and we're going to get you lined up, okay?
You want to see how